Good afternoon. I know it's a Sunday. I think it's a Sunday. And I'm really touched that all of you have spared the time, taken the trouble, come a distance to be here with all of us today. And I particularly thank our friends, my colleagues on the stage who have taken the initiative in putting this event together. I'm here for normally what happens every September, end of the month, which is the UN General Assembly. So normally either the Prime Minister himself or the Foreign Minister leads the Indian delegation. This year the Prime Minister did not come, so that honor was given to me. I'd be very happy to talk to you about what we think about the world and the world thinks about us after 5 or 6 very intensive days in New York. Really met a lot of people, had a lot of conversations, did a lot of things. But having said that, I must tell you the real pleasure for me on this trip is to come to Washington. Because I get to meet a lot of you, many of whom I have worked with, spent time with. I think Bharat Bhai said I've been in many countries. Yes, that is true. But the only embassy I have served in twice in my career is Washington. So that itself should tell you something. And I say this not as a matter of sentiment or personal attachment, because during my professional lifetime as a diplomat, perhaps the biggest change that I saw and was a privilege to be part of was a change in the relationship between India and America. To my mind, even at the time when it was changing, it took many years to change, I would say decades to change. Those of us who saw it from inside, we could sense somewhere that there's a big change in the making. That this is not something purely diplomatic. It's not a very sarkari thing. This is a very profound shifting of the view of two societies about each other. And when societies shift in that manner, it is only possible because at a popular level, the perceptions have changed. And to my mind, the reason that has changed in the popular level is people like you. That this living bridge that you represent, the Indian American community, I think very honestly, and some years ago I wrote a book. I've actually said that it is actually in many ways the street which taught policymakers what change was about. And for me, always the role of the Indian American community in fashioning this relationship is something which I can never say enough about. Again, we've seen this trend accelerate in the last few years. Madison Square Garden was one of its high points. Every time we talk about it, there's a different sort of, even you would have seen when Bharat Bhai's tone changed when he spoke about it. But having said that, I think today I'm very glad, very proud that I'm talking to a community which has done so much to change what is for us extremely critical relationship. Now, having said that, I think as Sunanda ji reminded us, this is also an occasion to discuss a book which came out recently. And it was a book to mark 20 years in administration, in government of Narendra Modi. And why we thought of the book was, in democratic politics, it is very, very rare to find anybody who has enjoyed the people's confidence for 20 years continuously. Because democratic politics is very competitive. It has a faster cycle. It has a shorter shelf life. So there's something obviously very unusual, maybe actually extraordinary, about anybody who can have a record, a continuous record of 20 years in office, and God willing, many more thereafter. Now, when the people who came up with the book idea put a group together, my understanding was that they did not want this to be a routine exercise, getting people to say good things. It's like a formality almost. So they did two things. One, they looked for a very broad, very diverse set of people to write. So if you look at it, the book, there are only two politicians, myself and Amit Bhai. There's one other person from the government, Ajit Doval. Everybody else is from a different domain. There are business people, there are authors, there are philanthropists, there are technologists, there are eminent doctors, there are people in the country, there are people outside the country. So it's a very interesting, in a sense, I would say, it is like Modi ji being viewed from a 360 angle by different people with different interests and a different perspective almost. And that makes it really a very, very interesting book. The second, and I say this because I got these instructions as a potential author, people, we were told, look, don't say the usual things. Write it from your heart if you can. Just sit there and think about what comes through your mind. Make it human, make it interesting. Pen your thoughts, and most of all, put this in a perspective. This is not a memoir, it's not anecdote, though it contains personal recollections of people. But put Narendra Modi in the context of the change in India which he is leading, but of which he is also a very, very powerful symbol. So that is the manner in which we approach this book. So what I would like to do today, if you all agree, is really read out for you. I normally do 2-3 readings, short readings from different chapters. Somewhere I end up with my own chapter. I think people feel that is necessary. But today I would also like to read a segment from what Bharat Bhai has written. But I start with someone, I think, whom every Indian would identify with, and that is Lata Mangeshkar. Right? So, this is what Lata Mangeshkar has to say about Narendra Modi. By temperament, Narendra Bhai is not what we conventionally imagine of a politician. From my various conversations with him, I sense that his pursuits are different. He has no attachment to power. His goal is larger, to be able to do something for the people of India. His passion lies in the fact that he wants the growth story to be meaningful for every person in our country. In India's history, the name of Mahatma Gandhi is etched in golden letters because he turned the entire freedom struggle into a mass movement. He motivated every citizen to think that any action that they would do strengthens India's resolve for freedom. In the same spirit, Narendra Bhai is turning India's development journey into a mass movement. He is connecting every Indian citizen to this goal. Then she goes on to say, in the past 7 years, he has brought in several unique initiatives aimed at removing poverty and suffering. Due to his efforts, the poor have got bank accounts, social security, homes, electricity, water. It is a testimony to his hard work that he's been given yet another sweeping mandate by the people in 2019. I can say with confidence that the world is talking about his governance. And I can certainly reaffirm that as a foreign minister of India. Now, I give you a very different side, different dimension, from a very different person. Many of you would have heard of Amish Tripathi. If you haven't, please ask your children. They surely would have heard. So he is one of the most popular writers in India. He writes a lot about, historical, mythological, cultural, civilizational sort of fiction, or you can say epics. Or it's a kind of a very interesting literary space that he occupies. He's also currently the head of our cultural center in London. Now, he's put it this way. India is a civilizational state, but many post-independence leaders were chary of seeing it as one. Prime Minister Modi has broken out of that mold. Many of the leaders of post-independent India rejected the civilizational memory of our land, and our educational and cultural worldview ensured that educated Indians were cut off from our ancient ethos. It was as if the elite of the Indian state was presiding over a civilization and yet attempting to set aside and erase that very civilization. Indians either forgot or became uneasy with the vague memory of who they were. Milan Kundera has said, the first step in liquidating a people is to erase its memory, destroy its books, its culture, its history. Before long, the nation will begin to forget what it was, what it is, and what it was. In contrast to many earlier leaders, a clear message from Prime Minister Narendra Modi is, we must remember who we are. It is a message that most common Indians instinctively resonate with, even if they cannot formulate it into words. We are the inheritors of a great civilization with roots that go back in historical time. We are the only ancient pre-bronze civilization that still throbs with life. And the stream that unites our land is Dharma. Dharma is in fact the string that holds together the garland of multiple different flowers that is our subcontinent. Yes, India defines the phrase unity in diversity, but it is Dharma that makes this unity possible. And we must understand that Dharma is beyond and above any religion or ritual. It is a law of life. So that is a second context in which I invite you to look at the current Prime Minister of India. So now I move from there to someone who knows the Prime Minister very well, Amit Bhai. The Home Minister of India, Amit Shah, in fact, brings out the political criticality of what Narendra Modi has achieved. Don't think of it as the win of this party, or that we have a strong Prime Minister, or you have to, he makes you understand in 2 paragraphs why it is important that today's political direction is going the way it is and why it must be supported. And I read from him. For the 25 years between 1989 and 2014, India has been governed by coalitions. Coalitions, by their very nature, are a compromise. They're a compromise of political interests and a compromise of policy outcomes. Fatalism had set in among ordinary citizens. And let's be honest, none of us will dispute that. They too had come to compromise with their aspirations, whether for themselves and their families, or for India of their dreams. There was a feeling that policy paralysis, administrative confusion, quarreling ministers and blackmailing allies, corruption, insecurity and vulnerability to terrorism, and weak and indecisive prime ministers who acted more as managers than leaders, were built into the coalition system. These had become a permanent curse on Indian democracy. A low level of equilibrium of expectations had set in India that taught itself not to think big and think ambitious. The 10 years between 2004 and 14 represented the pinnacle, perhaps nadir is the most appropriate word, the pinnacle of this national listlessness and despondency. Popular morale was low, India's people were dejected. It was against this backdrop that Narendra Modi emerged as a compelling all-India candidate for Prime Minister. He took the BJP into new areas, constituencies and social groups. More than that, he ignited hope. Then I come to one of the authors, the one you know better. So I quote from what Dr. Barai says about, at the end of his recollections. He says, Modi has cleaned the lens through which the world now views India. He has given focus to India's domestic priorities and aligned the world, not through muscular showmanship, but by connecting hearts and minds to the possibility that India can offer the world. He has, in many ways, single-handedly changed the rules of engagement. Modi has aimed high, and by raising the profile of India, solving historically intractable problems, and by relentlessly improving Indian governance, he has given agency to Indians globally to hold their heads up high too. With 20 years of public service behind him, Modi's record speaks for itself. Whether he will be regarded as India's greatest ever Prime Minister and in turn as one of the world's greatest ever leaders are questions that will be answered at a time when history is ready for him. And there is still some way to go for that. For now, the man, the mission, and the phenomenon that is Modi marches on. Now, in a similar vein, but without his expressiveness, I have tried to cover the same ground, but from a much more practical perspective of someone who has traveled with him, seen him on foreign stages, participated in his interactions with foreign leaders. And so I'll conclude my remarks with a paragraph from my own chapter. And this is what I have to say. There is no gainsaying the fact that Prime Minister Modi looms large on the world stage. Definitely, his policies and initiatives have had their impact. But there is also a personal respect that influences the attitude of others. Peers perceive him as quintessentially Indian and respond accordingly. His language, his metaphors, his appearance, his mannerisms and habits, they define a persona that the world has now come to recognize. I recall how fascinated American leaders were about his fasting habits during the 2014 visit, or the interest that Europeans showed in his yoga routine. A large element of this is also the manner in which the Prime Minister carries himself. Not just that, he is equally enthusiastic about sharing India's traditions and customs with his interlocutors. His own intuitive feel for diplomacy also led him to find connects between foreign countries and their leaders with India. Shaping the narrative is always a challenge in the quest for change. Departures from the past are ready targets for criticism in the name of political correctness. Prime Minister Modi has faced more than his fair share of attacks. They could be on his efforts to remedy historical wrongs, disregard vote bank politics, and consolidate national unity. Or at the other extreme, the fact that he chose to elevate mundane issues like toilet shortages and firewood usage to the level of a national debate. In a globalized world, it is also inevitable that these conversations would spill beyond our borders. Having weathered many storms during his chief ministership, he is obviously dealing with them with his characteristic confidence. But these discussions also drive home the need for Indians to have an adequate say in the global discourse. So, thank you for your patience, for your attention, for listening to me, these 5 excerpts that I have read out to you. To my mind, though I read about a book and a person, I think I also put in your minds a sense of the changes that have happened, especially in the last 8 years. The fact that whether it is how we are perceived in the world, what is our weight today, what is our image, our collective persona. I think in different ways these passages have brought it out. I can only tell you that all these descriptions, the essence of that I felt this week in New York, the interest that people had in engaging with us, the belief today that we speak not only for India, but for a lot of other countries. The fact that our opinions count, that our views matter, that we have actually today the ability to shape the big issues of our time. I think all of these were, to me, takeaways from a very, very intensive set of interactions over the last 6 days. So I'd be very happy to talk to you about the book, about any other aspect of what is changing in India, because I live there, I travel there, I sit in the Council of Ministers. I perhaps have a sense of the ground which you can only get if you are in the political profession. For me, the canvas is really open. So thank you again for being here, and I look forward to the interaction.
Thank you, Dr. Jaishankar. It is always enlightening to listen to you. Thinker, intellectual, politician, India's foremost diplomat, and now a social media rock star as well. How many of you wake up in the morning and see his little one-liners on your WhatsApp? I would, just a little bit of housekeeping. There are volunteers going around. If you could give your questions to the volunteers, they will all put it together. And we will hopefully have time to ask as many questions as possible. The volunteers must be around. If you have questions, just be seated, just raise your hand. A volunteer will come to you and you can give your index card with your questions. Make sure your name is written on the index card. The volunteers are roaming around now. Moving ahead. If you just raise your hand, sir, right there, somebody will be coming. Volunteers, there are people at the back as well. Now, I invite Shri Khanderao Kanji, Director, Foundation for India and Indian Diaspora Studies, FIDS, to deliver vote of thanks. We'll have question and answer after that. Dr. Khanderao, Mr. Khanderao Kanji.
On behalf of US-India Friendship Council and Foundation for India Indian Diaspora Studies and entire Indian American Indo-Americans and Indian diaspora leaders present over here. I would like to thank Dr. Jaishankar ji for his leadership effectively representing India in this global stage, especially in this very testing time of the international conflicts. He has really established a perception about India's leadership and position about the future, how it will evolve. He has been here for UNGC, and he took out time from his hectic schedule just to come here and address us. I would like to thank him especially for taking out time in his hectic schedule. I would like to also thank Ambassador Taranjit Singh Sandhu and his staff for facilitating this program, and Dr. Vijay Chauthaiwale ji to help us to make this very successful. This program wouldn't have been successful without your participation. You all came from all various different states, far away from even California, on all the corners of United States. And all of you are very busy leaders of this community, prominent people. But you came here especially because you can interact with Dr. Jaishankar ji. The program nature that we schedule is such a way that we are spending more time to these interactive sessions where you can ask the questions. Also, thank all of you for generously supporting and donating to US-India Friendship Council. Please continue to do that. Finally, I would like to appreciate my colleagues here on the dais, also numerous volunteers who made this program successful and logistic very perfect. Thanks again.
Thank you, Kandirao-ji. We will have a picture session, a photo session for everyone. So please be seated. Trust me, there is a method to this madness. We are going to do it the right way. So if you continue being seated at your place, we will have a photo session or a picture session at the end of this program. For now, we are going to get to the most interesting part of this program. We will do the Q&A questions now, your questions, and Dr. Jaishankar answers them. What I'll do is I have Richa ji and Pranjali ji helping me with this question answers. I'm going to, Dr. Jaishankar has his microphone. I'm going to stand there and we're going to ask questions and we'll make sure that, Dr. Jaishankar hears them right away, and we'll start from there. So just give me 1 second. Okay, we get to the business right in the first question, sir. Dipanshu from Harvard University, he's asking, do you think it's in India's strategic interest to mediate in the Ukraine-Russia war? You did not expect this question, did you?
No, I thought I left this behind in New York when I came. But look, I think what is happening today is we are seeing a conflict which is not in anybody's interest, not in the interest of those involved in the conflict, and certainly not those in the interest of those who are impacted by it. Now, here's the difference. 20 years ago, a conflict would take place in some part of the world. You'd read about it in your, those days, your newspaper, see it in the television. You may have views about it, but your personal life would be less impacted by it. Today, the nature of the world is such that a big conflict by this up? A big conflict by definition, it has enormous ripples across the world. It has upturned, I mean, look at what you are paying, the cost of fuel in the pump, the food inflation, what's passed on through almost everything you consume one way or the other, how travel has got disrupted, how trade has got disrupted. So I think the world has stakes today in bringing this conflict to an end. This is a very broad sentiment that I saw in the United Nations. Now, the question is, what can be done best? There's no easy answer to it, because this is a conflict between two neighbors who speak very similar languages, who know each other well. So, often when you say mediation, it is when there's a lack of communication or a lack of understanding or distance. That's not the case right now. But we have already seen, for example, there was an effort made to bring grain shipments out of Ukraine through the Black Sea. This was led by the UN Secretary General. Other countries, some other countries were very prominent, especially Turkey. And we did our little bit in support of that effort. Today, I think this conflict has different facets, and perhaps some of those may be addressed in the earlier period. If we can help in some way, we would be obviously responsible enough to do that. I think the participants know that, the rest of the world knows that. Beyond that, what happens, that's in the realm of diplomacy, so I can't say anything more.
So the next question is also for Sri Jaishankar ji. The question is, we are in a battle of civilizational narratives. China and other countries have invested in preparing their narrative. What is India doing, and how can the Indian American community play a bigger role?
Well, I'm not quite sure I would agree with the premise of that question, this battle of civilizational narratives. But I would say it is perhaps necessary for any country, any civilization that is occupying a more prominent space in the world's thinking to put their narratives out, so that the world understands what we are about. It's something which is very natural. I mean, after all, in our personal lives, we explain ourselves to other people. So in our collective lives, we do that as well. Now, how do we do that? It's an interesting example you gave of China, because China is a statist polity in a way. That, there is a government, the government has institutions or organizations. We are not. We are a very people-centric, democratic society. So, to my mind, India should be India. We should do what works for us best, what other people see as natural for India. If we start behaving like some other country, people will actually raise eyebrows and say, what are these guys doing? So, to my mind, it is actually if you think of a diaspora, we have today a diaspora of 30 million plus people of Indian origin and overseas Indians, non-resident Indians. When they live their lives, interact with other people in the countries where they live in a way they are putting out our narrative. Their habits, their practices, their successes, these are all takeaways for the people who they meet. Of course, the Indian government, the Indian state, the Indian nation, the Indian society will do its bit. But I think we have a very unique ability to influence what the world thinks about it for the better. And that unique ability is all of you. I mean, that's why, when we say your success is our success, please don't take that as a polite phrase. I mean it really very, very literally. That this relationship, the India-America relationship has changed because of Indian Americans. It did not change only because of government policy. And I would put that as a good example for shaping the civilizational view of India as well.
Thank you. Is it too loud? Is it better? Yeah. Okay. So next question is, how can we leverage our physicians' expertise, experience, and deep connections in US and India to improve healthcare and medical education?
I'm sure all of you travel quite often to India, perhaps less often in the last few years because of COVID. But I would encourage you to do so, because when you travel around India, especially in the last 3 years, you'll be surprised at the change that you're seeing. You will see it's not just the physical change, the fact that more roads are being built and more buildings are being built, the fact there are more cars on the road. I mean, all that is there. The real difference today is the fact that in very fundamental ways, the needs of the people are being effectively addressed especially using technology. The fact that during COVID, a social safety net for 800 million people could be created on food, or on finance for 400 million people. The fact that today we are trying to create a national health system. A health system, 15 years ago, people would have told you a national health system is only for high-income countries, and even high-income countries struggle with it. In fact, if you look at India today, because there's a digital backbone on which this is riding, it could be health, it could be insurance, it could be pension, it should be farmer support, it could be home ownership, it could be loans for business. All of this is happening really at a scale and an effectiveness that you cannot conceive of if you do not make a visit, and make a visit preferably outside a city, so that you are actually able to see what is happening outside a big city. Now, how do you get, how can a physician's talent be leveraged? Look, the country can today do with the experiences and the knowledge and the insights of others. I mean, there could be technology insights, there could be medical experiences, there could be organizational skills. Even when we did the massive toilet scheme, I mean, you would be surprised how many people were motivated to go back home and say, okay, in my village, I will build 100 toilets. And one of the reasons this happened on such a scale was people waited. So at the end of the day, there were 2-3 passages I read out. I mean, Lataji's was one. I think Dr. Barai's remark was also this, that you cannot, India will change, yes, but India will change much slower if it is government policy. India will change much faster if you can fire up, if you can ignite the enthusiasm of people. And I think the people who live outside India know things, there's a lot that they can bring to bear. And certainly on medical, I would say even expanding the number of medical institutions in India is actually today a very big part of the agenda.
Absolutely. Dr. Jaishankar, we have an eclectic audience here, so the questions are also from a remarkable range. Madhukar wants to know, could you tell us any difficult situation you felt in your long career, where you had to struggle to defend India?
You know, could the person who asked the question stand up for a minute?
Madhukar.
No. I'll tell you why. I just wanted to validate my assumption that you are a much younger person than me. And the reason I say this is, there was a time when you actually had to struggle every day to get your point of view across. Yes. You know, so I know that this question came from a younger person because they are in an era where, since we have arrived, they're used to, people knowing about India, there's a respect for India, there's, you say, I'm from this place, okay, they know what you're talking about. So I'm telling you, this town, when I first came here in 1984, you actually had to explain to people where you're from. A simple example will tell you, there were no Indian restaurants here. So if they didn't know your food, how do they, where do they start placing you? And my first stint actually at the embassy was doing, one of the responsibilities was going to the Congress. And again, when you say, did you struggle to defend India? We used to struggle to get into people's offices. Because that was not the image we had, that was not the respect we had. We didn't count in American calculations at that point of time. So, honest answer, I spent most of my life, professional life, actually in a period where we were sort of going up the ladder. It was a daily struggle every day. And remember, we were a much poorer country. Today, people would not, I speak to younger colleagues, they don't believe what we were paid. And it wasn't just, in the government. Even people who went out, there was a time when the foreign exchange allowances per day was, I think, $7 or something like that. So, this is a country which has worked very hard for 50, 60 years. If you are India at 75 today, 75 years was not like this. We've really picked ourselves by the bootstraps and worked our way up. And it has reflected itself in the diplomacy and politics, and it's because we have sharp elbows and sort of held our own, even when we didn't have the resources that we have today. But precisely for that reason today, I would say it's important to establish our place, our weight, our influence, our opinions in the world. It's, that's how it's been.
I must remind the audience that today India is the 5th largest economy in the world. So,
and I thought you were going to say, guess whom we have just overtaken.
We know this is an eclectic audience. They know who we just overtook. Yes. Thank you so much.
So, a related question from another young heart, Shashank Gupta. He has a thank you note. He says, India's strong and powerful attitude towards foreign policy has altered the weak and indecisive figure in last few years. As a student and a scholar in Europe and US, I have felt it closely. And his question is, as the foreign minister, what's your message to students, scholars residing abroad?
India has a very large number of students abroad. Many of you would be surprised how large the number is. It's more than 1 million at a given time. And it's really across a very, very wide sort of range of regions. People go abroad for a variety of reasons. Some of them perhaps because they found that the best alternative. Some of them because they wanted to pursue something specialized. So I would say it's difficult to give a single kind of answer to what is a very, very broad set of people. But collectively, I think what is common should be that whatever they do, wherever they go, some will make the choice, which is would be natural in their circumstances, to settle in that country and work there. Some of them may come back, some of them may build relationships back home. I would only say that a country like India, I think we have always seen our citizens, our people, retain a very deep emotional bond. Okay. The fact that we are a family-centered society actually strengthens that bonding. So to the students, I think more than anybody else, I would say that they should explore opportunities, they should build international relationships, they should find ways wherever they are studying of connecting that country back to India. And they should shape the image of India in that country. And I would say my own experience, I mean, wherever I go, to the extent possible, I try and visit a university where there are a lot of Indian students. And I would say almost always I only hear good things about our students. They make us very proud.
Thank you. Dr. Jaishankar, I know you did not refer to this country in your UNGA speech, but it's a country that we've tried very hard to de-hyphenate in our foreign policy, but it is on somebody's mind here. Vishal Chawla would like to ask, United States just released funds for Pakistan related to, he says, purchase of F-16, but I would like to remind them it was not purchase, it was maintenance of F-16 fleet. So the question is, how is the US policy towards India evolving? Does it differ along Republican and Democratic lines? And I guess he wants to know that in press, at least, we keep going back and forth. There are high moments, and then there are moments like this F-16 moment. And what would be your opinion about that?
Well, I think it would be, today I can say, by and large, there is a bipartisan view of India. It's not that one party is strongly for and another is against it. And to a large extent, politics is also very individual. So some leaders, some prominent figures in each party would take more interest. Others may not take the same level of interest. So I would attach no sense of partisanship at all when it comes to India. The second question, really the nub of the question, which is in a sense the US relationship with Pakistan and the military relationship that the US has had. Now you all know that this is not something of recent making. It has gone on for many years. And you also know that very honestly, it's a relationship that has neither ended up serving Pakistan well, nor serving American interests well. So it is really for the United States today to reflect whether this, what are the merits of this relationship, what do they get by keeping it continuing. Because at the end of the day, for someone to say, I'm doing this because it is for counter-terrorism, when you are talking of an aircraft like the capability of the F-16, I mean, everybody knows, where they are deployed and what is the use and what is their capability. So, you're not fooling anybody by saying these things. So the point is, we really think countries finally make their choices based on their own interests. And I would make a case, if I were to speak to a American policymaker, I would really make a case saying, look, what you are doing, forget about us for a moment. It's actually not good for you, what you are doing. Reflect on the history. Look at the last many years of where this relationship has taken you and how much, what a cost you paid for it.
Thank you. And also, at some point, they need to get away from this strategic geographical location business. It isn't as much as we think it is. Next question.
Again, a related question. Dr. Shobha from Atlanta asking, what are some steps taken by India to forge US-India defense deal in 2022?
You know, one of the changes in our relationship has actually been the defense cooperation, which has really come about in its current form maybe in the last 15 years or so. From 1965, after the 1965 war happened, pretty much for the next 40 years, the US sold virtually no defense equipment to India. So this was, in fact, the period when the India-Soviet, India-Russia relationship became very strong. Now, this was not for a lack of trying on India's part. That you actually, I can vouch for it myself, I've had my relatives, my father, my grandfather, they worked in the defense ministry. So I know firsthand, what great efforts were made over multiple years to try to make the US understand that it was in American interest to have a strong, united, independent, prosperous India. Now, at that time, they did not succeed. Maybe the state of the world was such, the state of, the mindset of American policymakers was such. The change was really triggered by the nuclear deal that removed a very big obstacle to go forward. And then to actually take the relationship to a high level required a leadership in India that did not have also reservations on its own mind, because it takes two hands to clap. It was not just that, all the problems were on the American side. There were hesitations on the Indian side as well. That's why Prime Minister used that very memorable phrase in his address to the Congress, hesitations of history. So we also had to address the hesitations on our side. I think today the relationship is on a very different footing, that we have the possibility of working together in many more areas, especially the security domain. Some of our major exercises are with the American military. We fly a number of American planes today, the C-17, the C-130, the P-8s, American helicopters, Chinooks, Apaches. So it's changing. I am very sort of bullish on the future of this relationship. I think there are very deep convergences which will sustain it over many, many years. And as I say, I always take greater inspiration from the fact that the community serves as a bridge. So I'm very, very confident that not just the relationship will grow, but the defense and security side of the relationship will also.
Nissim is asking this question. Could you please comment on growing ties of India with Israel and India's Jewish heritage?
Well, there is, India is one of those very rare societies where Jews never had to face persecution. And it's something which, if you go to Israel, they will tell you this. For many years, we had a Jewish community. Obviously, it was not numerically a very large community. Some of that community is still in India, some of it is in Israel. But considering that we are such, old civilizations with such deep traditions, it would have been natural that there should have been a stronger bonding between India and Israel. That did not happen. It did not happen primarily for political reasons in India. The politics of India discouraged the natural relationship, which the bulk of the people of India would have actually been very comfortable with. And so it actually took someone like Narendra Modi. He was the first Prime Minister of India to actually visit Israel, and that tells you something. Now, there's a lot in that relationship. I mean, there's a defense security side, there's a startup side, there's an agriculture. The Israelis are great at drip irrigation. They're very good at actually applying technologies in a very effective manner. So when we look at even different aspects of development, energy, I mentioned agriculture, all of that are positives that can be harnessed. In the last 8 years, there's been obviously, once we are free of our prejudices and our mind blocks, then the relationship will grow. So for the first time, I would say after 2014, actually the road of this relationship is clear, that those sort of political vote bank type obstacles which were there, they were removed. So we've now seen it grow, and it's very interesting. There's a surge in the number of Indian students who have gone there. You spoke earlier about students. That's one place in Israel today our researchers are really making their mark. We have also created a grouping called I2U2, which is India, Israel, UAE, and US. They are among our partners with whom we have very, very close and friendly ties. And a lot of it, I think, is based on civilizational respect for each other.
Thank you. And the next question is from Rajiv Pandit. He wants to ask, in the past few years, the Indian-American community has shown its political strength in countering anti-India forces. We are also countering these forces legally and in the courts. But US educational institutions are still under anti-India influence. Is there more we can do with exchange of thoughts and ideas between US universities and India's true ethos?
Since all of you follow what is happening in India, you would all be familiar with the fact that at home too, there are very intensive debates about what we are, where should we, where do we belong, what should be our aspiration, what is politically correct, what is not. And in a globalized world, the sort of spread of this, the extension of this debate is inevitable to happen outside your country. I mean, debates are no longer conducted within national boundaries. And because we also have a community here, Indian American community, that also is a reason to some extent why the debate carries on. This, to my mind, is a very important issue, because it is an issue which will define in India what is India about. That bit which I read out to you about from Amish Tripathi. Are we proud of our civilization, or are we in denial of our civilization? Are there periods in our history we want to whitewash, or are we honest about our history? If you look at when we speak about democracy, is democracy actually an exercise of expressions of opinion, or is it that actually in the name of political correctness, opinions which you don't like are suppressed? And to my mind, this challenge of what is right, what is wrong, what is correct, what is not, what is legitimate, what is illegitimate, I think this is a very, very big issue. When I look, you spoke about American universities. It's not just what I see written in by some people. I look at media. there are, there are some newspapers, you know exactly what they're going to write. You know. So, including one in this town. So you know, look, my point is there are these there are these biases, there are these efforts really to determine how I put it. Look, the more India goes its way, and the people who believed that they were the custodians and the shapers of India lose ground in India, the more actually some of this debate is going to come outside. Because they're not winning in India. So they will try and win outside India, or try and shape India from outside. So this is something which we need to be aware of. It is important to contest it. It is because the most of the Americans, they would not know sort of the nuances and the complexities of our world. So it's important, not to sit back, not to let other people define you. That is something which I feel as a community it's very important for us to do.
We all carry on our backs the scars of all the newspapers, including the one in this in this city. So we totally understand what you're saying. We have time for two last questions. Unfortunately, we won't be able to accommodate all questions because of paucity of time, but there is always a silver lining. That means that Dr. Jaishankar will have to come back again to answer these questions. So I'm keeping all these questions, Dr. Jaishankar, for you to come back again. So please don't lose hope. If your question hasn't been asked, it will be asked next time. Dr. Jaishankar, Dr. Mohan Sapru is asking this question. He says, Kashmir situation is often misrepresented or misunderstood in Washington. What is the current understanding of US lawmakers about Kashmir and terrorism there?
This is, in a sense, a very inadvertent but a very logical follow-up of the previous question, because it's a very good example. If there is a terrorist incident, and it doesn't matter of what faith the person who's killed. If there are Indian soldiers or Indian policemen who are abducted or killed, if there are people working for the government or citizens going about their business who lose their lives, how often do you hear people talking about it, pronouncing on it? In fact, look at the media coverage. What does the media cover? What does the media not cover? And that is how actually opinions and perceptions are shaped. There was a big song and dance about internet being cut. Okay. Now, if you have reached a stage where you say an internet cut is more dangerous than the loss of human lives, then what can I say? So the fact is if you look at the whole 370 issue, it's a fundamental, maybe I should not be looking in your direction. I ask you all to just a very basic point. What was a temporary provision of the Constitution was finally put to rest. This was supposed to be act of majority. Wait. This was supposed to be majoritarian. Now tell me, what was happening in Kashmir was not majoritarian. So, I think the way facts are slanted, things are played up, what is right, what is wrong is confused. This is actually politics at work. And again, we should not let it rest. We should contest it, we should educate, we should message, we should shape the narrative. This is a competitive world. We need to get our messages out. That is my message to you. That, we are not serving our country well, or our beliefs well, or our, or even our sense of what is right and wrong well, by staying out of these debates. I think if we have opinions, we must express them, we must share it with people, we must educate others on what is right and what is wrong. And I honestly believe that if you look at the whole 370, the Jammu and Kashmir situation, to me it's mind-boggling that something whose merits were so obvious should actually, that there should even be people who could think in a different way.
So that's the narrative part, that we all have to educate ourselves first and then take that message forward. So the next and the last question here is, global dominance requires domestic monopoly on science and engineering. Indians have been leaders in science and engineering, but India hasn't been. How does India plan to harness the talent which is eager but not in India? The question was asked by Parth from Princeton.
Absolutely. I agree that, strengthening science and engineering is absolutely vital to India's future. Not just that, I think there are other steps as well. And I would say there's recognition of that in India. So if you look actually from Prime Minister Modi downwards, the efforts today which are being made to expand educational institutions, especially in science and engineering, to expand research, to a domain like space has got, the profile of this domain has really grown tremendously. If you look even during the COVID period, it's not just we were happy making vaccines. There's actually there's a spike of interest in science, in health, in pharmaceuticals that we see. So the point is that for a large country like India, it is important to build deep strengths. It is important to have supply chains at home. It is important to have patents. It's important to have researchers. And most of all, it is important to have relationships with other countries who have strengths. And I would say, especially in science and engineering, to me, no question, our number one relationship should be with the United States. It is a country which has tremendous achievements to its credit. It is, as the question itself says, that is the backbone, that is the foundation on which American power is built. I believe that the Indian-American community can actually bridge this, need very, very effectively. And if there were a few areas I would really select to put my money on, it would be really to promote science and engineering cooperation between India and the US.
Thank you so much.